Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a story that sits at the bizarre intersection of literature, love, and a shocking crime. It is a case that asks a haunting question. Can the words an author writes for a fictional story come back to haunt them in a real-life courtroom? This is the story of novelist Michael Peterson and the death of his wife, Kathleen. Picture this. It's December 9th, 2001, in Durham, North Carolina. The night is quiet, except for a frantic 911 call that shatters the peace. On the line is Michael Peterson, a well-known local novelist and newspaper columnist. He's hysterical, telling the operator his wife, Kathleen, has had an accident. He says he found her at the bottom of a staircase in their sprawling mansion. He cries, "She's still breathing," followed moments later by, "She's not breathing anymore." When paramedics arrive, they find a scene far more gruesome than a simple fall. Kathleen is lying in a pool of blood with severe injuries to the back of her head. The amount of blood is staggering, spattered high up on the walls. It just doesn't look like an accidental tumble down the stairs. The police immediately feel that something is very, very wrong. So, who are the Petersons? On the surface, they were the perfect power couple. Michael was a successful writer, known for his novels based on his experiences in the Vietnam War. Kathleen was a high-flying executive at Nortel, a major telecommunications company. They lived in a beautiful home, hosted lively parties, and were deeply involved in their community. They had a blended family of 5 children, and to the outside world, their life seemed ideal. But as investigators began to peel back the layers of this seemingly perfect life, they would uncover secrets, financial troubles, and another mysterious death from Michael's past that was eerily similar. The initial theory from Michael was simple. Kathleen, after drinking some wine, must have slipped and fallen on the poorly lit back staircase. He claimed he was outside by the pool and came in to find her, but the forensic evidence told a different story. The autopsy revealed that Kathleen had 7 deep lacerations on her scalp. The medical examiner concluded these injuries were not consistent with a fall. Instead, they were indicative of being struck repeatedly with a light yet firm object. The sheer volume of blood loss also suggested she had been bleeding for a long time before she died, possibly up to 2 hours. This directly contradicted Michael's story of finding her just after the supposed accident. The crime scene was telling a story of a violent struggle, not a clumsy misstep. As the investigation deepened, the prosecution started building its case, and it was a bombshell. They uncovered that the Petersons were in serious financial trouble, with over $140,000 in credit card debt. Kathleen had a substantial life insurance policy worth $1.5 million. Could this have been a motive? Then, investigators looked into Michael's personal life and made another shocking discovery. On his computer, they found thousands of images of male escorts and correspondence with a 26-year-old male escort with whom Michael was arranging a meeting. The prosecution argued that Kathleen had discovered Michael's secret bisexual life, leading to a confrontation that ended in her death. They painted a picture of a man living a double life, whose carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. But the prosecution had an even more stunning card to play, one that would take everyone back nearly 2 decades and across the ocean to Germany. In 1985, while Michael Peterson and his first wife were living there, a family friend named Elizabeth Ratliff also died at the bottom of a staircase. At the time, her death was ruled an accident caused by a cerebral hemorrhage that led to a fall. Eerily, Michael Peterson was the last person to see her alive. After her death, Michael and his wife became the guardians of Elizabeth's 2 daughters, Margaret and Martha. The similarities were uncanny. A woman, a staircase, and Michael Peterson present at the scene. The North Carolina prosecution successfully petitioned to have Elizabeth Ratliff's body The new autopsy, performed years later, reclassified her death as a homicide, concluding she too had been bludgeoned. This revelation was a turning point. Was Michael Peterson just the unluckiest man in the world? Or was this a pattern of behavior? The trial began in 2003, and it was a media circus. The prosecution's case rested heavily on the financial motive, the secret life, and the damning evidence from the Elizabeth Ratliff case. The defense, led by the charismatic David Rudolph, fought back hard. They argued that the police had botched the investigation from the start, suffering from tunnel vision and immediately assuming Michael was guilty. They brought in their own experts to contest the forensic findings, suggesting Kathleen's injuries could have been from a fall, perhaps complicated by a clotting disorder. They portrayed Michael as a loving husband and a victim of a biased justice system. The courtroom drama was intense, with Michael's children torn. His son stood by him, while Kathleen's daughter from a previous marriage and her sisters became convinced of his guilt. The 2 daughters he had adopted, Margaret and Martha, initially supported him but were visibly shaken by the revelations during the trial. Then came the centerpiece of the prosecution's physical evidence, or rather, the lack of one. If Kathleen was bludgeoned, where was the murder weapon? Police searched the house and grounds extensively, but found nothing. The prosecution theorized it might have been a blowpole, a fireplace tool that was a gift from Kathleen's sister. The sister testified that the blowpoke was missing from the house after Kathleen's death. The prosecution argued Michael used it and then disposed of it. However, the defense dramatically produced the supposedly missing blowpoke during the trial, covered in cobwebs, claiming it had been in the garage all along. It had no dents, no blood, nothing to suggest it was a murder weapon. This was a major blow to the prosecution's theory, leaving a gaping hole in their narrative. Despite the missing weapon, the jury was ultimately swayed by the prosecution's case. The financial strain, the secret life, and the chilling parallels to the death of Elizabeth Ratliff were too much to ignore. In October 2003, Michael Peterson was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For many, justice had been served, but for others, the verdict was a miscarriage of justice, built on circumstantial evidence and character assassination rather than concrete proof. The story, however, was far from over. Years passed. Michael Peterson maintained his innocence from behind bars. His legal team filed appeal after appeal, all of which were denied. The case might have faded into true crime history. But then, a new, completely unexpected theory emerged. One of the Petersons' neighbors proposed a truly bizarre idea. What if Kathleen was unkilled by Michael, but It sounds absurd. Right, but the neighbor pointed out that microscopic owl feathers and a sliver of wood had been found entangled in Kathleen's hair, held in her own hand. The theory goes that an owl, perhaps a barred owl, common in the area, attacked Kathleen outside. Its talons could have created the deep, straight-line lacerations on her scalp. In a panic, she ran inside, bleeding profusely, and then fell on the stairs, hitting her head again. While it sounds like something from a fantasy novel, some experts did admit that the wounds were consistent with the talons of a large bird of prey. The owl theory became a popular alternative explanation, adding another layer of strangeness to an already perplexing case. Dwayne Deaver, a bloodstain pattern analyst from the State Bureau of Investigation, had provided misleading and exaggerated testimony during the trial. An internal review found that Deaver had misrepresented his findings in numerous cases, including Michael Peterson's. This was the crack in the foundation the defense had been searching for. The judge ruled that Deaver's testimony had been critical to the conviction and had unfairly prejudiced the jury. As a result, the original verdict was thrown out, and Michael Peterson was granted a new trial. After 8 years in prison, he was released on bond and placed under house arrest, awaiting a new legal battle. But the state wasn't eager for another lengthy, expensive, and unpredictable trial, and Michael, now in his 70s, was not eager to risk another life sentence. So, in 2017, a legal compromise was reached. Michael Peterson submitted an Alford plea. This is a peculiar and rare legal maneuver where a defendant can plead guilty to a lesser charge, in this case, manslaughter, while still maintaining their innocence. By entering this plea, he acknowledged that the prosecution had enough evidence to potentially convict him again, but he did not admit to committing the crime. The judge sentenced him to time already served, and with that, Michael Peterson walked out of the courtroom a free man. So, what are we left with? A novelist who wrote about secrets and deceit, whose own life became a tangled web of them, a tragic death that has been explained as a fall, a murder, and even an owl attack. A justice system that convicted a man only to later acknowledge that the conviction was based on flawed evidence. Michael Peterson is free, but the question of what truly happened on that staircase in December 2001 remains unanswered. Did he kill his wife? Was it a freak accident? Or is the truth something stranger than any fiction he could have ever written? This case continues to fascinate and frustrate, serving as a powerful reminder that sometimes the line between fact and fiction and guilt and innocence can be terrifyingly blurry. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. This case is incredibly complex, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think happened to Kathleen Peterson? Let's discuss it respectfully. And if you found this story compelling, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.